Oh, hey, it's me. And I just finished recording this video and now I'm recording the intro just to tell you guys, brace for impact in this ARK Invest brainstorm on Tesla Robotaxis and, importantly, the humanoid robot. Without a doubt, you're going to hear the most outrageous, ridiculous, unbelievable comment in ARK Invest history. This is not hyperbole. Stick around and brace for impact.
Okay, so here's the logic. As it turns out, Robotaxi is an incredibly difficult, challenging problem. We know this because I think I did my first unit economics on a Robotaxi in 2011. So here we are in 2025. And that was because it seemed as if Waymo had demonstrated they could do it. They had their little koala cars that they were building. They're running around. It's like you can hop in one of these and not die. They were demoing hey, let's put a blind person behind the wheel of this thing and show that it can get you from place to place. And then the excruciatingly slow, long development process to make these things work, including having to shift over to a full AI stack in order to do it, which Waymo maybe has not yet fully accepted. We don't know. Has taken a long time. And you could look at what's happening in the humanoid space right now and be like, well, that looks a lot like Robotaxis did 10 years ago. And so there's this question. Tesla is talking about scaling Optimus. There are private companies that are raising money at very high valuations, including in our venture strategy. We're invested in Figure, and others. And so how hard is the humanoid robot problem is an interesting and open question. And I think because we're about to cross the commercialization threshold for Robotaxi, I think we can say how much harder is it than Robotaxi to get a sense for how much at least AI compute power we're going to have to throw at the problem to solve it. And there's wide error bars here, but I think it's 200,000 times harder.
Jesus Christ, I nearly choked to death. That's what she said. Did he just say 200,000 times harder? Holy shit. I can't wait to hear how Brett has come up with this extraordinary number. Surely this is going to be fascinating. I'll note he was referring to 200,000 times harder, at least in terms of the amount of AI compute that will need to be thrown at it. If he's right, I'm sure a lot of NVIDIA investors have just nutted. We didn't say it's going to take 200,000 times as much time, but this seems to be directly in relation to compute. Please tell us more, Brett. Fucking hell, dude. ARK have said some rather outrageous things in their day, but holy shit, this has to be number one by a long shot.
And so to get there, it's just it sounds like a number pulled out of a hat, but it's not. It's not, because you can kind of disaggregate the complexity of the problem into the various things that the Robotaxi has to, or the humanoid robot has to do compared to what the Robotaxi has to do. So an easy one to understand is a Robotaxi takes, in Ashok's presentation, it takes 2 billion tokens in context, and it compresses it into basically 2 outputs. And I would argue 3, but he's doing one pedal driving, right? It says where am I steering and what am I doing with the gas, right? So it's just 2 outputs. Now think about the human body and how many actuated outputs you have. You have, every single joint in your body, you're making subconscious decisions about how to move them and to what degree to move them, how much force to exert on them. And so the difference in kind of the number of decisions goes from 2, 3, maybe you're doing derivatives of them. So on Robotaxi, you say you have 5 different kind of degrees of freedom to something like 20 to 40, depending on how, it's not like I'm able to bend this joint independently of these other joints, but there's some kind of simplification of the action signals I'm sending out. And so that's a big multiplicative difference in the complexity of the problem. And there's different categories of that complexity. The road space is really designed to be easy to drive in. It's very structured. You have don't cross over the yellow line, and here's a big bright light that tells you to stop. And the diversity of objects you have to deal with is much simpler. I mean, it's basically just pedestrians and cars and bicycles. And, you could say there's maybe tens of objects versus when I'm walking around my house, there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of different types of objects that I'd have to think about differently. A coffee cup is different from a power drill. And so as you stack up these different layers of complexity, they compound, and the full multiplication, as you can read about in the newsletter, leads to an expectation that's a 200,000 times more difficult problem.
So without having actually looked at ARC's newsletter, I am following along, generally speaking, with what Brett's saying here. Quite obviously, a vehicle, you're talking about which way are you steering, left, right, and how intensely in either direction or neutral, and are you accelerating or braking and how intensely. In a fairly simple environment, lanes clearly marked, fairly clear signage, a fairly simple environment, but there is two big caveats there. Number one, velocity, e.g. moving at very fast speeds, means extremely fast decision making required. And then of course, there's all of the other road users also moving at very high velocity. You need to anticipate what they intend on doing. So this problem is a little harder than it may first look. But the key to solving autonomy, at least with vehicles, is to solve vision. And not the kind of vision that involves simply being able to look out into the world, but to see, perceive, understand what you're seeing, to plan based on that, and then to act. Vision is a very complicated problem, almost solved by Tesla. And they've been able to transplant that brain into the humanoid robot and get a huge head start. You've got to solve vision. And that includes a general understanding. This is why Tesla's FSD V12 rewrite, trained purely end-to-end on video, deleting 300,000 plus lines of code, was a monumental moment. Because rather than needing to teach the vehicle, here's what a lane divider is, here's what a broken line is and means, a double line, a stop sign, traffic lights, traffic cones. What do you do when there's a pedestrian? Instead, it just got trained on a bunch of video of great human drivers. And then emergent properties include the ability to read road signs, to understand road rules, and to drive safely. Tesla now has a general solution to autonomy that knows how to drive, period. To Brett's point about the multiplicative complexity involved in a humanoid robot, his point is fair. What's involved for a vehicle to drive forward in one direction without any steering, literally just move forward, is one input, the accelerator. That's it. For a human or a humanoid robot to do likewise, I mean, the human body itself, probably a few hundred independent muscles involved just in walking, none of which we are consciously thinking about contracting and relaxing and the timing and synchronizing. None of that shit is conscious. Once we have trained ourselves, stumbled, crawled, then walked, and nailed walking, we're not consciously thinking about it. It becomes second nature. So once trained, executing the task itself is very simple. But there is, admittedly, an enormous amount of underlying complexity that becomes subconscious once we've figured out how to walk. Same is true with anything to do with locomotion or, importantly, manipulating our bodies and or especially our hands. And in a recent interview with Tesla owners in Silicon Valley, this topic came up. I was asked what I was most focused on in terms of Tesla in the next few years. And without question, no doubt, it's the Optimus humanoid robot's hand. Locomotion, no problem. Plenty of robot startups have robots that can walk without an issue. Some of them a little bit of a Joe Biden shuffle, but at least they're walking. But the big problems to solve with the humanoid robots, one, vision. Tesla's pretty much sorted that out. Put that to the side. And two, the hand needs to be extremely dexterous. And most people, because we don't think about this consciously, don't appreciate what's involved. With enough training data, human beings can see an object we have never touched before, and based on previous training data, anticipate the texture, how it will feel, how to grip, grasp, manipulate, how much friction our fingers will need to put in this place and we don't think about it. It just happens. We can grab an object we've never touched before for the first time and almost flawlessly pick it up, move it, manipulate it. No problems. Because we have generalized manual hand dexterity. This stuff happens automatically. Now, this is the most important area for Tesla investors to be focused on, is progress on the Optimus humanoid robot's hand. Now, my hunch, with sufficient training data and plenty of compute, as Brett points out, these problems will be solved and they'll become the equivalent of subconscious for humanoid robots. I think the big difference between what's happening with autonomous vehicles and humanoid robots, two very different challenges. Autonomous vehicles, the big challenge really is velocity. You need to make very fast life or death decisions. Whereas with humanoid robots, it's not velocity but dexterity. Walking is pretty easy. Seeing is not that hard, at least Tesla seems to have solved that problem. But being able to manipulate, to grasp, to handle objects, and I know what some of you sick fucks are thinking, that's the final test. It is extremely complicated. I repeat for the trillionth time, the thing to focus on with Tesla's humanoid robot or anyone's humanoid robot is hand dexterity. Elon Musk a while ago referenced an Optimus humanoid robot doing a demo, threading a needle. That's got to be a massive milestone, an incredibly difficult challenge.
And then, like, as a reader, what do I do with that number? Okay, it's 200,000 times more difficult. What is that?
Well, the reason that's important is because we know roughly how much AI compute Tesla has thrown at Robotaxi in order to solve it. And so we can see the degree to which they are error reducing their solution to the Robotaxi space. And then basically say, well, humanoid robots is just 200,000 times more error reduction they need to get to. And so you can make an estimate for how much AI compute, even with the kind of software rate of improvement we anticipate in AI to solve humanoid robots. And it's probably on the order of, the falling out of our model, you need basically $200 billion in AI compute spend to get there. But I'd say it's safe to say it's $100 billion plus.
So that sounds like a very large number. And as Brett's pointing out, this is also factoring in the improvements in the software itself, e.g. vastly improving efficiency with AI. Otherwise, we would end up with a figure of 200,000 times as much AI training compute, right? But what this nets out to, call it conservatively $100 billion of AI training compute, that's actually fuck all. That's roughly one order of magnitude more than Tesla's currently investing annually in AI. So it's a lot, but it's nowhere near as much as you might imagine. With all of that said, the harder this problem is to solve, the better it is for Tesla. Here's why. Number one, via FSD, Tesla has a huge head start, pun intended, having essentially solved vision via a gigantic fleet of millions of vehicles collecting data and training in the real world to solve, wait for it, vision. That's now been transplanted into the brain of the humanoid robot. Good luck solving vision if you ain't Tesla and you didn't have the fleet and you didn't have the data and you don't have FSD. Number two, Tesla has very, very deep pockets. Good luck to any company without tens and tens of billions of dollars in cash and investments, bringing in billions of dollars of cash per quarter to even attempt to solve this problem. Next, data. Very fucking important. The way you collect data for training humanoid robots is by deploying humanoid robots in the real world, which involves one, making them, and two, deploying them. Tesla has a massive advantage of being their own first customer. You want useful humanoid robots that are capable of contributing in a factory setting, warehouse setting, production lines, automotive. You'll need to train them in those exact situations. So Tesla has a massive advantage. They can produce an Optimus humanoid robot, or 10 or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, deploy them in their own factories. Initially, there'll be a net drag on productivity, but eventually they become capable enough that they can contribute. They learn new skills. And when one humanoid robot knows how to do a task, essentially the whole fleet does. Then once you've nailed this, you have useful humanoid robots operating in a factory setting, production lines, doing simple, boring, repetitive tasks. You now have a commercially viable product you can sell to other companies who also produce products in a similar situation. If you ain't Tesla, how do you get that much training data? The answer, of course, is to make the robots and then give them to a company for free to train on? How does that work? They need to be deployed in the real world, doing real world tasks in order to get better at those tasks. You need a lot of data, not just the training compute. All of this is to say, as I mentioned, the harder this problem is, the better for Tesla. No matter which way you slice it, Tesla has a number of massive advantages when it comes to successfully scaling useful humanoid robots. I would not want to be trying to compete with them.
Because it depends on, are they spending it on NVIDIA chips? Are they able to not spend all that gross margin on NVIDIA? It would be bad to ship 75 or I guess $150 billion in gross profit to NVIDIA if you could produce it yourself as competitively, which Elon's planning to do. And so there's some kind of efficiencies they could get on the hardware side to get there. But then if you take our model and you say, hey, we're throwing a ton of the Robotaxi cash flow at AI compute, I think the software problem for humanoid robots is solvable in the 2029, 2030 timeframe, but it's going to be a long, hard investment cycle, is my belief.
So 100 billion dedicated specifically for humanoid robot software training.
Yes.
Which is
yes, at least. I would say 100 to 200, I think is fair. And that's part of the reason, Elon keeps talking about this. Hey, we really need to be able to train on these distributed chips that are in the vehicles, because he's probably back of the envelope how much money he needs for this. And he's like, wow, that's a lot of money. And here we are like putting these computer chips in robotaxis and they're not operating as computer chips for half the time. Let's try to, use all of the resources at our disposal to train this stuff, because it's going to be such a hefty training load.
How wild would this be? Tesla training their humanoid robots on Tesla's global fleet of vehicles during downtime as a gigantic distributed AI training cluster.
So they are thinking about ways to do this more efficiently. And I think people generally underestimate, just like a decade ago, people looked at the koala cars from Waymo, including me, and said, wow, they've basically solved this. And now, here they are. Waymo's still on such a kind of like fragile stack, they're having trouble scaling. I think people see the Chinese robots doing like kung fu fighting and wild dance moves, and they'd be like, well, obviously that's something that's really hard for me as a human to do. The robot can do it. Therefore, it should be able to do all the simple things that I do throughout my life without even thinking about it. And actually in robotics, those simple things that you don't even think about are the hardest things. And so I think that there's a lot of kind of software development that needs to happen, leaving aside like the challenge of manufacturing these things and making them work. Just the software side is going to cost a lot of money and resources and pain, sweat, and tears to get there.
Approximately 200,000 times more pain, sweat, and tears. What do you guys think? Are humanoid robots that much harder than solving autonomy? Want more content? Early access? Bunch of perks? Click the links in the pinned comment. AG1 has been part of my daily health protocol for almost half a decade. It's packed full of vitamins and minerals and helps me fill in nutritional gaps while supporting energy, digestion, and immune function. It also has prebiotics and probiotics to promote gut health. I take my health very seriously, and so should you. Try AG1 today by visiting drinkag1.com/SMR or click the link in the pinned comment and enjoy a free welcome kit with vitamin D3 plus K2 and AG1 travel packs. That's drinkag1.com/SMR.